I spat on the cross, not in my mind, not in anger at a distance. I walked right up to that wooden thing behind the old Baptist church in West Texas. Midnight, no one around, and I hawked up a thick string of rage and let it fly. It hit dead center, dripping slow down the beam like some kind of twisted ritual. And I laughed. I laughed like a man who'd finally said what needed to be said. "Where were you when she died?" I barked into the night, chest pounding like thunder. You ever hate God so much it makes you feel alive? That was me, Jack Harlan, ex-husband, former father. What kind of dad loses his daughter to the same darkness he's been running from his whole life? I wasn't always like this. I grew up in a trailer park near Midland, had a Bible in the kitchen, rust on the sink, and my mom crying behind closed doors most nights. But none of that hurt like watching Emily go cold in my arms. That night, when I spit on that cross, I thought I'd finally won against the God who never showed up. But I was wrong. So wrong. Because just as I turned to leave, something cracked in the air, like a rip in reality. And when I looked back, I didn't see a piece of wood anymore. I saw her, my little girl, hanging there, limp, eyes open, staring at me like I'd killed her all over again. And that's where this really begins. I know how that sounds. Spitting on Jesus' cross. People hear that and they write you off as evil. But I wasn't evil. I was empty. You ever feel so hollow inside that you can't tell the difference between anger and grief? That was me for years. After Emily died, I'd sit in her room at night, just staring at the posters on the wall. Taylor Swift, a broken unicorn lamp, her little red Converse by the bed like she might walk back in and slip them on. But she never did. She overdosed on my watch. Same pills I used to take when life got too heavy. I guess she learned from the best. People think losing a child is like ripping out your heart, but it's worse. It's like your soul forgets how to breathe. I stopped praying after her funeral, stopped believing. I mocked God online, laughed at those church billboards on the highway, even posted memes about Jesus being a myth. But late at night, when the whiskey wore off and the house went still, I'd find myself whispering one stupid question. Are you there? Not with anger, just desperation. I didn't need miracles. I just needed to know she wasn't alone, that maybe someone held her hand when she crossed over, that maybe someone could still reach me before I crossed the same line. If you've ever asked that too, wondered if someone's still listening even when you've cursed them, then maybe this story's for you. I grew up where the dust never settled, just outside Midland, Texas, one of those forgotten towns where the wind howls louder than people pray. My earliest memory, sitting in the back seat of a rusted-out Chevy while my mom screamed at my dad through a cracked screen door. He had one hand on a Bible, the other on a beer. That about sums it up. Religion was always around, but it never touched us. We had crosses on the wall, but no love in the house. I remember the wallpaper peeling behind the old couch and the way the air conditioner groaned like it was dying too. I shared a room with two brothers until they both ran off by 18. Mom left when I was 12, just didn't come home one day. Some say she ran off with a preacher. I never got the full story. All I know is, one Sunday, I was at a Baptist picnic eating dry hot dogs, and the next I was living alone with a father who hadn't smiled since Reagan was president. He wasn't violent, just, absent. The kind of man who stared at the TV while the world burned around him. I remember one night sneaking into his room just to ask if he believed in God. He didn't even turn his head, just muttered, "Maybe, if he's got a reason to watch this mess." I think that's when it started. The feeling that maybe no one was listening, that maybe all the prayers I whispered in bed were just echo chambers for my own fear. I tried to find connection in places that felt alive. School bleachers, parking lots behind 7-Eleven, cheap cigarettes passed hand to hand like secrets. I wasn't chasing rebellion. I was chasing warmth, even if it burned. People assume kids like me turn bitter because we're bad, but that's not it. It's the silence that kills, the silence of waiting for someone to ask how you are, and no one ever does. So I started filling the silence myself, with noise, with fire, with whatever I could control. By the time I hit 17, I was already numbing out on liquor and low expectations. I stopped going to church, started mocking the sermons, even made a game out of rewriting hymns into jokes. But deep down, I still hoped there was something bigger. I just didn't think it cared about me. And that belief, that twisted ache of abandonment, followed me into adulthood like a ghost I couldn't name. It didn't yell. It whispered, "You're alone." And that whisper, it shaped every bad choice I ever made. Emily was the only thing I ever did right. At least, that's what I used to tell myself. She came into my life like light through a broken window, unexpected, sharp, and warm in all the right places. Her mom and I were barely holding it together when she was born. I was 23, still drinking too much, still working part-time jobs that paid in bruises and gas money. But when I held her for the first time, something cracked in me. I promised I'd be different. I swore I'd break the cycle. And for a while, I almost did. We moved into a small duplex on the edge of Odessa. I got a gig fixing HVAC units. She'd wait by the door every evening, arms wide, ponytail bouncing. I still remember how her laugh could drown out the world, but life's funny like that. It lets you taste redemption just long enough to know what it feels like before it rips it away. When Emily was 12, her mom left, just like mine did. Said she couldn't watch me spiral anymore. And yeah, she was right. I'd been drinking again, hiding pain in brown bottles and fake smiles. Emily saw more than I thought. I caught her once looking at me the same way I used to look at my dad, like hope was slipping. By 15, she was stealing my pills. I didn't see it at first. Thought the mood swings were just teenage noise. But deep down, I think I knew. I was just too ashamed to stop her, too lost in my own guilt. The night she died, she was curled up on the bathroom floor, barefoot, pale, her favorite hoodie stained with tears. I remember screaming her name so loud my voice cracked for days. But she never moved. The paramedic said accidental overdose. I say it was inheritance. I passed down my demons like family recipes. And the worst part? I didn't even pray. I didn't call out for help. I just sat there, cradling her body, rocking like a madman while the world spun out. That's when the hatred set in. Not just for God, but for myself. I kept hearing church folks say, "She's in a better place." But how do they know? Did they hold her hand when she slipped away? Did they feel her breath fade like I did? I started to wonder if God watched her die the same way my dad watched my life unravel, silent, unmoved. That thought festered. It grew teeth. And from that night on, I swore I'd never speak his name again. But funny thing about pain, it doesn't leave you alone. It waits. And eventually, it demands an answer, even from the ones who stopped asking. After Emily died, I stopped pretending that work mattered, pretending that I was ever going to be okay. People say grief comes in waves, but for me it was more like quicksand, and instead of fighting, I just let myself sink. It started small, 2 shots of bourbon to fall asleep, a pill here and there just to take the edge off. But the thing about grief is, it doesn't want you numbed, it wants you destroyed, within months. I was high before noon, drunk by dinner. And no one noticed, because I made sure no one was around to. I quit my job. I sold Emily's things on Facebook Marketplace like they were just objects. I told myself I was letting go, but really, I couldn't stand the sight of them. Her handwriting on a notebook, her perfume still clinging to her bedsheets. Every item felt like a dagger, and I didn't want reminders. I wanted erasure. That's when the mockery started. At first, it was just dark humor. I'd scroll past Bible quotes online and comment stuff like, "God must have been out to lunch when my daughter died." People would reply, some angry, some worried, but I didn't care. It felt good to push buttons. It felt like power in a life where I had none left. One night, I made a meme, a picture of Jesus crying with the caption, "When you forget to save your favorite kid." It got over 1,000 shares. My phone lit up for hours, see? And for a second, I felt seen, not loved, just noticed. Like if I couldn't be the grieving father who got sympathy, I could be the broken man who made people uncomfortable. I even had a folder on my phone. God memes. Dozens of them. Some funny. Some cruel. Some that made even me pause. But I'd post them anyway, because the likes and comments were louder than the silence inside my house. My online persona became my escape. People knew me as that angry Texas guy who hates God, and honestly, that label fit better than anything else. Better than husband, better than father. I wore it like armor. But here's what I won't lie about. Every post, every jab, every sarcastic caption was hiding something much simpler. A question. A single, stupid question I couldn't shake. Why her? And when no answer came, I just made more noise. Louder, meaner, until all I had left was venom. And the terrifying part? I was starting to like the taste of it. It's strange how mockery turns into obsession. I told myself it was all a joke, that I was just blowing off steam. But over time, my jabs at God stopped being about humor. They became personal, intentional, targeted. Every time I saw a church billboard or a car with a Jesus fish bumper sticker, something inside me clenched like a fist. I started driving out of my way just to pass churches. I'd slow down, roll down my window, and yell things I won't even repeat now. Not because I was trying to change minds, but because I wanted to hurt someone. Anyone. The way I'd been hurt. I found an abandoned Bible in a thrift store once, and I bought it. Not to read, but to tear out the pages one by one. Every time the silence in my house screamed too loud, I'd light a cigarette, stare at Emily's old picture, and rip another verse from the spine. It was like reverse therapy. Not healing, but bleeding with purpose. I wasn't trying to get better. I was trying to make God feel it, whatever it was. There's this moment I remember clear as day. I was watching a street preacher outside a Walmart. Old guy, maybe 70, shaking as he held up his Bible. People just walked past, annoyed, but I stood there, locked in. And when he shouted, "Jesus saves all who cry out to him," I yelled back. Then he missed a few. He didn't even flinch, just smiled at me with these glassy, pity-filled eyes. That look, like I was some broken animal, lit a fire in me I couldn't put out. I walked home that night and started planning something I never thought I'd do. Not just memes, not just shouts. Something real, something physical. I didn't want to just mock Jesus. I wanted to confront him. I wanted to break something sacred with my own two hands, just to see if heaven would finally pay attention. The image of that old wooden cross behind the local Baptist church kept popping into my head. It wasn't even fancy, just weather-worn beams bolted into a patch of dead grass, but it symbolized everything I hated: blind faith, false comfort, a God who stayed silent while children died. So I told myself I'd go there, alone, at night, and I'd do something no one would forget, not even God. People say anger is a mask for pain, but mine wasn't hidden. It wore me like a second skin. And the closer I got it to that night, the more I could feel it tightening. Like a noose, I was willingly slipping around my own soul. I wasn't seeking peace. I was daring God to stop me. Spoiler, he didn't. Not right away. What started as late-night sarcasm turned into a full-blown identity. I wasn't just some grieving father anymore. I was the guy who hated God with the kind of fire you don't put out with sermons. And people noticed. My posts got shared. My DMs blew up. Strangers from all over the country messaged me things like, "Finally, someone's saying it." Some were angry, some were scared, but the ones that scared me most were the ones who agreed. It felt like I was building a tribe of the broken and bitter. My Facebook became a graveyard of memes and mockeries. I'd livestream myself reacting to televangelists, pausing their promises of healing to laugh out loud and say, "Where was that healing when my daughter turned blue?" I started a podcast, just 10 episodes, called Holy Hypocrites. I called out everyone, preachers, believers, even my old Sunday school teacher from back in Midland. I said things I can't take back, and deep down, I wasn't proud, but I couldn't stop. Because for once, I was winning. In a world that had robbed me blind, I had finally found something I could control. My rage, my narrative, my truth. But the more I mocked, the more hollow it felt. The laughs stopped feeling real. I'd end every live stream drunk, talking to an empty screen, slurring apologies I didn't mean. One night, I stared at the comment section for hours, waiting for someone to say, "You're okay now." But no one did, just more fire emojis, more laughing faces. I was surrounded by noise, but I'd never felt more alone. Then it happened. One simple comment that cracked something in me. Some guy wrote, "If you're so sure God doesn't exist, why are you still yelling at him?" I wanted to delete it, block him, but instead I just sat there, staring. Because the truth is, I wasn't yelling at the void. I was yelling at someone, hoping he'd yell back. And when he didn't, I got louder. That was the night I started driving past the old church again. Not for nostalgia, not for faith, but because something inside me whispered, "Go show him what you really think." And I listened. The church wasn't even that special, just a small, white-paneled Baptist place off the highway, tucked between a feed store and a dusty Shell station. But to me, it was a symbol of everything I lost, of everything God didn't fix. I used to take Emily there when she was little. She loved the stained glass window with the lamb, said it looked like a cartoon. I'd sit in the back row, hungover, half listening while she sang along to the hymns. But now, that place felt like a lie wrapped in nostalgia, a grave dressed in gospel. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to burn it down or spray paint profanity. No, that would have been too obvious. I wanted something personal, something that couldn't be ignored. I wanted to defile the thing that people bowed to, the cross. I started planning it like a heist. Late night drive, no cameras, black hoodie, quiet footsteps on dead grass. The thought alone gave me chills. Not fear, anticipation. Like I was finally going to speak a language God couldn't ignore. I told myself it was protest, a message, but deep down, I knew it was revenge. Revenge for every unanswered prayer, for every night I begged him to give her back, for the silence, and yeah, maybe for my own shame too, for being the father who gave her the pills, even if I didn't mean to. The night before I went, I sat in my truck outside that church, engine running, heart pounding like a drum. I looked up at the dark sky and whispered, "You better be watching." I wasn't bluffing. I wanted him to see. I wanted heaven to feel as humiliated as I had. I was drunk, yeah, but not sloppy. I was clear, focused, deadly in my intent. I imagined myself walking up to that cross and spitting right on it, like a soldier spitting on a traitor. I wanted to hear the wood crack under my rage. I wanted to see the night itself flinch. But most of all, I wanted something, anything, to happen. A sign. A voice, a bolt of lightning. But none came. Just the wind through the trees, like the world was holding its breath. And that made me angrier, because silence, to me, had always felt like abandonment. And if God was going to stay silent, then so be it. I'd speak for both of us. And what I had to say couldn't be written in words. It had to be carved in disgrace. It was colder than I expected that night. Texas doesn't get cold often, but the wind had a way of cutting through denim when your body's running on spite and liquor. I parked down the road, engine off, just like I planned. The church lot was empty, the building dark, no lights in the windows, no signs of life, just me and that cross. It stood in the back field, behind the old youth center, where weeds grew higher than memory and time seemed to pause. I walked with slow steps, not because I was afraid, because I wanted to feel it. Every crunch of dirt, every heartbeat in my throat. I could see the moonlight hit the cross like it was daring me. It wasn't big, maybe 10 feet tall, wood splintered from weather. But to me, it was the tallest thing I'd ever faced. I stopped 2 feet away, my fists clenched, my jaw locked. My breath fogged the air like smoke from a fire I hadn't lit yet. And then I spat, hard from the gut. It hit just under the center beam and dripped down like venom from a snake's mouth. And as it ran, I laughed, loud, crooked, defiant. "Where were you?" I shouted, hands shaking. "Where were you when she died?" I stepped closer and spit again, this time higher, right where the face would have been on a crucifix. "You said you loved the little children. You liar." The wind didn't answer. The stars didn't blink. Nothing moved. And still, I kept going, cursing, crying, half screaming, half weeping like a madman with no one left to beg. I slammed my hand against the wood, once, twice, enough to sting, not enough to break. I didn't want to destroy it. I wanted it to stand there, soaked in my rage, a witness to my rebellion, a monument to my pain. For a split second, I expected lightning, a gust of wind, a voice from the sky, something biblical, but there was nothing, just silence, deafening, brutal, holy silence. And that was worse than punishment. That was abandonment confirmed. I backed away, breath heavy, shoes damp with dew. My chest was tight, but not from fear, from emptiness, like I'd thrown everything I had at the heavens, and they didn't even bother to duck. And as I turned to leave, something inside me whispered, not loud, not divine, just human and broken. What if this is all there is? That thought followed me like a shadow all the way home. I thought I'd feel something, power, release, even guilt would have been a relief. But as I drove home that night, windows down, fingers frozen on the wheel, all I felt was nothing, not peace, not victory, just a hollow ache where the fire used to be. I walked into the house and it hit me how quiet everything was. The walls felt like strangers. The pictures on the shelves stared like witnesses. Emily's door was still closed. I hadn't opened it in weeks, maybe months. I poured a drink. Sat on the floor, no TV, no music, just me and the cheap whiskey, and that damn voice in my head. Now what? I thought spitting on that cross would break something open, like I'd finally force God to show himself, or punish me, or at least flinch. But he didn't. And I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was just tired. So unbelievably tired. Like I'd been carrying a weight made of memory and rage. And when I finally threw it, there was no one to catch it. Just sky. I started scrolling through my phone. Old photos, mostly of Emily. Her as a toddler in the backyard pool. Her 6th birthday with the unicorn cake. Her prom dress. Her graduation that never happened. I stared at one picture for over an hour. Just her sitting in my truck, grinning with braces, window rolled down, wind in her hair. She looked alive. I didn't. That's when the tears came. Not loud, not theatrical, just steady. I cried until the bottle was empty and the floor felt like a coffin. I whispered her name like it was a prayer, even though I didn't believe in prayer anymore. I just needed to hear it, to keep her here, somehow. And then, almost instinctively, I muttered something I hadn't said in years. God, if you're there. I stopped, not because I changed my mind, but because I didn't know what to say next. I wasn't asking for forgiveness. I wasn't begging for answers. I just wanted someone to hear me. Anyone. I looked at my reflection in the dark TV screen, unshaven, hollow-eyed, ghost-like, and I finally saw it. I hadn't spat on God because I hated him. I did it because I missed him, because I needed him to show up. And he didn't. That night, I didn't fall asleep. I passed out, on the floor, surrounded by emptiness. And somewhere between dreams and darkness, I heard a voice, not loud, not even clear, just this gentle, steady hum inside me. She's not gone. I jolted awake, heart pounding. But there was no one there, just silence again. And yet, it didn't feel quite the same. The next morning, I woke up on the floor with dried tears on my face and a sour taste in my mouth that no amount of coffee could wash away. My back ached, my head throbbed, but my chest, that was the worst. It felt empty, like something had been ripped out of me in the middle of the night and nothing came to fill the hole. I stood up, walked to the bathroom, stared at myself in the mirror. I looked like a man halfway between death and decay. Red eyes, cracked lips, a face that didn't look like mine anymore. I brushed my teeth in silence. The whole house felt like a tomb. Even the walls seemed to breathe with a kind of coldness I hadn't noticed before. I opened the window just to prove the world was still there. It was. Birds chirped. A car drove past. Life carried on. But something inside me hadn't. I'd crossed a line, one that couldn't be uncrossed. And for all my rage, for all my spit and screams, heaven stayed silent. That silence, it echoed louder than any thunder. I started pacing, trying to make sense of what I had done. Was it blasphemy, protest, madness? I replayed it in my mind, the spit, the laughter, the second of triumph, and then the hollow crash afterward. I kept asking myself the same question over and over. What now? Not in the practical sense. In the soul sense, I had no more weapons to throw, no more gods to curse, no more anger to hide behind. Just this terrifying stillness, like standing in the center of a storm that already passed but left everything uprooted. I tried watching TV, couldn't focus. Tried music, made it worse. Everything reminded me of her. Every sound, every silence. That's when I saw her picture on the fridge, Emily, in her soccer uniform, grinning with that missing front tooth, hands on her hips like she ruled the world. And it hit me, not like a memory, but like a warning. I whispered, "I'm sorry." But it came out cracked. That night, I didn't drink, not because I didn't want to, but because it felt pointless, like the poison wouldn't reach deep enough anymore. I lay in bed, lights off, eyes open, waiting for sleep that never came. And then, just before dawn, the air changed, subtle, still, like the room held its breath. And I felt it, something, watching, not in a creepy horror movie way, but in a way that made my skin crawl with recognition. As if the cross I spat on wasn't finished with me, as if heaven had finally turned its face not to punish, but to respond. My heart raced, my hands went cold, and somewhere deep inside, I knew this wasn't over. Something was coming, and it wouldn't come gently. It started with the light, not the kind that flicks on with a switch or pours through a window. This was different, subtle at first, pale, almost metallic. I was lying in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling when it crept in, seeping through the cracks of my closed door like fog under a church door. I sat up, heart pounding, not sure if I was dreaming or finally losing it. The air had shifted, heavier, colder. It pressed against my chest like a weight I couldn't see. I rubbed my eyes, but the glow didn't vanish. If anything, it grew brighter. I stepped out of bed, bare feet hitting the floorboards, and suddenly every instinct in my body screamed, "Don't go toward it." But I did, slowly, compelled by something between fear and hunger. I opened the door, and that's when I felt it, heat and ice all at once. My hallway was bathed in pale, unnatural light. It flickered like candle flame, but cast no shadow. My breath came out in sharp clouds, even though the heater was running. I whispered, "Hello?" Nothing. Just the low hum of silence that felt alive, like the quiet was watching me. The floor creaked beneath me as I moved toward the source. It wasn't the living room, not the kitchen. It was coming from Emily's room. Her door, which I hadn't opened since the night of the funeral, was cracked open, light spilling from the edges like something divine had broken through. My knees buckled. I grabbed the wall to stay standing. Part of me wanted to run. Another part, the part that hadn't spoken to God in years, was hoping he was finally answering. I pushed the door slowly. It opened without a sound, and what I saw stole the breath right out of my lungs. The room was untouched, frozen in time, her drawings still taped to the walls, her stuffed animals arranged just how she left them, but they glowed, not brightly, but faintly, as if dust had been replaced with light. Then, the smell, not perfume, not candles, something sweeter, familiar, like Emily's hair after a summer day. I stepped inside, and the moment my foot crossed the threshold, every sound disappeared. The wind, the heater, even my heartbeat, gone, replaced by a silence so thick it felt holy. I stood there, paralyzed, mouth dry, eyes darting, and then, from the corner of the room, I heard it. A single sob, not loud, not staged, the kind of cry a child makes when they're trying not to cry at all. My spine went rigid. I turned toward the sound and saw a shape, small, curled up in the corner, hair draped over her knees, shoulders shaking. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. I just whispered, "Emily." And that's when she lifted her head. Her face was pale, but not lifeless. Her eyes, those same wide hazel eyes I used to see peeking through blankets at bedtime, looked right through me. There was no anger, no fear, just a sadness that pierced deeper than any scream. She didn't speak, just stared, and I knew it was her. Not a memory, not a dream. My Emily. In the corner of that glowing room. I dropped to my knees, hands trembling. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Baby, I'm so sorry." Her lips moved, but no words came out. Just a soft exhale. Her shoulders slumped like the weight of the world had been pressing down on her for years. Oi! And only now was she letting it show. I crawled forward, slowly, like approaching a wounded animal, terrified she'd disappear. "Please," I begged. "Say something." And then she did, without sound, just a mouth forming the words. "Why?" My throat clenched. I couldn't answer. I wanted to scream because I was broken, because I didn't know how to be whole for you. But I said nothing. Just stared back, shame flooding every inch of me. Then she stood. Her body moved with that same awkward grace she had as a kid. And as she rose, something behind her shifted. The wall, the window, no, the space itself. It cracked, not like glass, but like fabric tearing in slow motion. Light poured through the split, golden, warm, vibrating like the hum of a choir you feel more than hear. I looked back at her, eyes burning. "Do you forgive me?" I asked, voice shaking. She didn't nod. Didn't speak, but a single tear fell down her cheek, and when it hit the floor, the room pulsed, like the house had a heartbeat. And then she turned, slowly, and walked toward the tear in the air. I lunged forward, screaming her name. "Emily!" My fingers brushed her shoulder, and my whole body froze. Not just stopped, but paralyzed. A sensation like electricity and fire and wind and ice all at once tore through me. I collapsed to the floor, unable to move, mouth wide open in a silent scream. From behind the light, a shadow emerged. Not dark, not evil, just vast, uncontainable, like a presence stepping through time itself. And then I heard it. A voice. Not booming, not loud, but absolute. Gentle, infinite. "She is mine." My eyes rolled back. My vision blurred. My heart felt like it cracked open. And in that moment, I understood. She wasn't gone. She wasn't lost. She was held, Jill, protected, loved by something so much greater than me, something I had mocked, spat on, denied, and yet. It showed me this. I wept on the floor, sobs shaking my entire body, whispering the only word that could come out. Why me? And from the light, the voice returned, because even the broken belonged to me. I don't know how long I lay there, face to the floor, breath shallow, limbs frozen like stone. Time didn't exist in that room. The air felt thick, like I was underwater but still somehow breathing. My ears rang with silence, but under that silence, there was something else. A sound, or maybe not even a sound. More like a feeling that pressed against my chest like a heartbeat from outside my own body. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't wind. It was a whisper. A voice I didn't hear with my ears, but with something deeper. It said my name. Not Jack, like most people call me. It said my full name, Jacob Harlan. The way my mom used to say it when she prayed over me as a kid. Except this time, it didn't sound like disappointment. It sounded like someone who'd been waiting. I wanted to speak, to ask 1,000 questions, to scream, cry, confess, but I couldn't move. All I could do was listen. The voice didn't accuse. It didn't justify. It just spoke like it knew me better than I knew myself. "You weren't made for this pain." The words didn't make sense, and yet they unraveled something inside me. All the years of grief, guilt, hate, I felt them peeling off like layers of mud I didn't realize I was carrying. I started to shake, not from fear, from release, from something breaking that had been chained up so long I forgot what freedom could feel like. Then came another whisper, so soft, it almost felt like a thought I didn't author. "She is more alive than ever, and she is not angry." My throat clenched. I tried to cry, But the tears had already poured out. I just lay there, trembling, while the presence wrapped around me like warm water. "You didn't lose her," the voice said. "You tried to carry her alone, but she was never yours to carry. She was mine, always." And in that moment, I realized something that shattered me. I had spent so many nights screaming at God for taking her, when the truth was He had been holding her the whole time. I just never looked beyond my pain long enough to see it. I had blamed Him for the silence, but He'd been whispering all along. I was just too loud in my rage to hear it. I think that's when the light started to change. It wasn't just golden anymore. It turned soft, subtle, like morning light breaking through storm clouds. I felt a warmth crawl into my chest and settle there, steady and sure. The room around me was still glowing, but the weight had lifted. I wasn't whole. I wasn't healed, but I wasn't alone anymore. And that was enough to make me finally whisper back, "I hear you." I thought spiritual encounters would feel like peace, like floating or soaring or some kind of euphoric high. But this was raw. It was fire in the bones. My whole body felt like it was being rewritten, cell by cell, thought by thought. My fingers tingled. My skin buzzed. My heart beat not just in my chest, but in my fingertips, in my throat, in my spine. I wasn't just experiencing something holy. I was being undone by it. And yet, for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of being broken, because somehow I knew this wasn't destruction, it was reconstruction. A slow, patient remaking, like someone was rewiring everything I believed about myself, about Emily, about what love really meant. I curled into myself, pressing my palms against the floor as if it could hold me together. But the pressure didn't hurt. It pulsed. It carried meaning. Every breath I took in felt like it was telling me, "This matters. You matter." And then came the memories, not as flashbacks, but as living echoes. I saw Emily as a baby in my arms, her tiny hand gripping my finger. I saw the first time she scraped her knee and looked at me with trembling lips, waiting for comfort. I saw myself holding her at 3 a.m. while she had a fever, whispering lullabies I didn't believe in. All these moments I'd buried in grief came flooding back, but now they weren't stabbing. They were shining. Each memory wrapped in grace, right? Like they'd been preserved, waiting for me to see them with new eyes. And then, one final image. Emily, standing in a field of light, her face turned toward something behind me. She smiled, not at me, but at whatever stood above me, unseen. And in that smile, I understood the meaning of every pulse, every whisper, every fire in my bones. I had not ruined her. I had not failed beyond redemption. She was okay. And somehow, so was I. Not fixed, not finished. But no longer drowning. The grief was still there, but it no longer owned me. The guilt was still real, but it no longer defined me. I sat up, body aching but alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. I looked at the ceiling, same as always. The room had returned to normal. No glow, no voices, just silence. But it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt sacred, like God had come and gone, and left something behind. Not a sign, not a miracle, just the simple, undeniable truth that I had been seeing. And in that seeing, I was changed. I stood slowly, legs shaking, took one deep breath, and whispered the name I hadn't said in years, not in vain, but in reverence. Jesus. I don't know how long I sat there, knees to chest, back against the wall of her old room, just breathing. But when I finally looked up, the air had shifted again, not heavy this time, not glowing, just still. But inside that stillness, I felt something unravel, not a vision, not a voice, something deeper, like a knowing that rose from the marrow of my bones. I saw it in my mind before I understood it in words. That night at the church, when I spat on the cross, I thought I was defying God. What I didn't realize is that He was there, watching, not with rage, not with thunder and wrath, but with grief, not for the cross, but for me. I saw myself again, spit flying, fists clenched, heart shattered, and for the first time, I didn't feel powerful. I felt small, lost, a child lashing out in pain, hoping the father would still come anyway. And he did, not in fire, not in lightning, but in whispers, in the light behind my daughter's eyes, in the trembling of my limbs when her tear hit the floor, in the way the air paused when I called her name. I didn't just have a vision of Emily. I had a collision with mercy, the kind of mercy that doesn't erase your past. It looks at it, holds it, and says, "Even this I can redeem." That's the twist no one warns you about. That God shows up in the places you're most ashamed of. The spit, the scream, the silence. That he doesn't run from the rebellion. He walks straight into it, unafraid. And when he speaks, it's not with fury, it's with tears. I realized then I hadn't broken heaven. I had broken open, and in the breaking, I made room for something I thought I didn't deserve. Forgiveness. Real, undeserved, impossible forgiveness. I looked around the room. No more glow, no more shape in the corner. Just her things. Her bed, her drawings, her little pink shoes by the closet. But they didn't mock me anymore. They didn't sting. They just were holy now, somehow. Evidence not of what I lost, but of what was given. A daughter, a second chance, a father I thought I'd cursed away. I stood up, knees cracking. My legs were shaking, but not from fear, from reverence, the kind that makes you walk slower. I walked down the hall like it was sacred ground, and as I reached the front door, hand on the knob, I didn't feel like a man crawling out of darkness. I felt like a man about to walk into light, not because I earned it, but because someone had waited there, well, the whole time, with open arms. And I whispered one last thing before I stepped out into the morning. You never left, did you? I didn't go to church that Sunday. I wasn't ready for pews and choirs and handshakes from people who hadn't seen what I'd seen. But I did something I hadn't done in years. I got on my knees, in my living room, alone. No music, no preacher, just me, the floor, and the silence I used to hate. And I broke, not in anger this time, in surrender. My body folded into itself like it had carried too much for too long and was finally giving up the weight. My forehead hit the floor, and the tears came hard. The kind that shake your ribs and leave your throat raw. I didn't have fancy words, didn't quote scripture. I just kept saying the same two things over and over. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. For what I did, for what I didn't do. For the bottles, for the pills, for the silence. For handing Emily my demons like a family heirloom. I wept for every moment I missed. Every bedtime story skipped. Every smile I never earned. I cried like a father who'd just been told his daughter was still alive, but not because of him, because of grace. And that kind of grace, it ruins you before it rebuilds you. I felt like a man on holy ground, barefoot and broken, holding out shaking hands to a God I'd mocked. And somehow, he was holding them back, not to judge, to lift. That room became my altar. That moment, my confession. I said her name out loud, not in grief, but in gratitude. Emily. And then I said his. Not sarcastically, not in anger, just honestly. Jesus. It came out soft, unfamiliar, like trying on a suit that didn't fit yet. But I kept saying it, over and over. Jesus. Until it wasn't strange anymore, until it felt like the only name I could trust with the wreckage of my life. And in that quiet, I didn't hear angels. I didn't see light. But I felt something shift, like the weight on my back finally let go, not because I deserved it, but because I finally let myself be seen, fully. Filthy, forgiven. And that's when I knew redemption doesn't come with applause. It comes with surrender. And surrender doesn't start with pride. It starts with collapse. I stayed there on the floor until my knees went numb. And then, like a man learning to walk again, I stood, still shaking, still unsure, but alive, more alive than I'd been in years. And that was enough. That was day one. It took me 3 days to pick up the phone, not because I didn't want to, because I didn't think she'd answer. My ex-wife hadn't heard from me in over a year. Not since the screaming match after Emily's funeral. Not since I told her she could keep her Jesus, her therapy, her moving on speeches. But that morning, after prayer number who knows what, I felt something nudge me. Not a voice this time, just a knowing. Make it right. I stared at her number for hours, typed the message, deleted it. Typed again. Finally, I just called. Voicemail. I hung up before the beep. Coward. But 2 minutes later, my phone rang. It was her. I froze, let it ring once, twice, then picked up. Hey, I said. That was all I could get out. The silence on the other end was heavy. Then I heard her voice, quiet, cautious, but kind. Jack? I almost lost it right there. I sat down on the floor again, like my body instinctively knew I couldn't handle this upright. I told her everything. Not the supernatural parts, not yet, just the real stuff. The breakdown, the drinking, the night at the church, the whispers. I expected her to hang up, to tell me I was crazy. But she didn't. She just listened. And then she cried. Not for her, not even for Emily, for me. I knew you were hurting, she said, but I didn't know how deep it went. I apologized, not with excuses, just truth. I hated you for leaving, I said, but I understand now. You were saving yourself, and maybe trying to save her too. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she whispered something I'll never forget. I never stopped praying for you. That hit harder than any sermon ever could, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. That night, I wrote her a letter, a real one, on paper. I told her I forgave her, and I asked for forgiveness, not for the past, but for how I carried it. I folded the letter, sealed it, and mailed it the next morning. 2 days later, she called again. Jack, she said, there's a prayer group at the little church by my house. I go every Tuesday. You don't have to talk, just sit. And here's the twist I didn't see coming. I said yes, not to impress her, not to pretend, but because for the first time in years, I didn't feel allergic to hope. And that Tuesday, when I walked into that church, she was waiting in the back row. She stood up, no words, just a hug, the kind that doesn't erase the past, but welcomes the future anyway. Redemption doesn't come in fireworks. It comes in routines, quiet, stubborn, ordinary routines. Waking up at 6 a.m. instead of noon, pouring out the whiskey instead of reaching for it, making coffee and reading the Bible I once tore pages from, same cover, same paper, but now every verse feels like it was waiting for me. The first time I stepped back into that Texas church, my hands shook. I didn't dress up, didn't pretend to belong. I just sat in the very back row, hat in hand, heart thudding like it might bolt out of my chest. The preacher didn't know my name. The people didn't recognize my face, but no one looked at me with suspicion, just soft smiles. One older man gave me a nod on my way out. That nod meant more than any sermon. I started showing up every Sunday, then on Tuesdays for prayer. I didn't speak at first, just listened. But something about hearing other broken people whisper hope into the silence helped me breathe again. I joined a small group, men who'd lost kids, marriages, themselves. No one judged me for my past. They just let me show up. Over time, I started sharing, just a little at first. My name's Jack. I'm here because I don't want to hate anymore. That was my first testimony. Quiet, honest, real. I quit drinking for good 2 months later. Got a job fixing HVACs again. Same work I used to do before it all fell apart. But this time, it felt different. Like I wasn't just patching broken machines. I was mending something inside myself. My house changed too. Emily's room, I didn't turn it into a shrine. I didn't shut it away either. I opened the door, cleaned it, and turned it into a quiet space for prayer. Her drawings stayed on the wall. Her Bible stayed on the nightstand. But now, there's also a journal, mine, where I write letters to God and to her, to the man I used to be. And every morning, before the sun rises, I go in there, sit on the floor, and just breathe. Sometimes I talk, sometimes I cry, sometimes I just sit in the silence. But I no longer fear it, because silence I've learned isn't always absence. Sometimes it's invitation. It's God saying, "Be still. I'm here." And every day I stay sober. Every prayer I whisper. Every life I touch, even just a little, feels like a stone laid in the foundation of a new life. One that's still cracked, still fragile, but no longer falling apart. And for me, that's a miracle. The first time I shared my full story out loud, it wasn't in front of a church or a crowd. It was across from a man who'd lost his son. We were sitting in folding chairs at a Tuesday night support group. He looked rough, tattoos faded by time, eyes tired, wedding ring still on a hand that trembled. When I told him I used to mock God, that I spit on a cross and saw my daughter in a vision I still don't have words for, he didn't flinch. He just nodded. And then he said something I'll never forget. Me too. He told me he'd been a youth pastor. His son overdosed at 16 and he walked away from ministry, from faith, from himself, slept in his truck for months, drank till his liver nearly gave out. But one night, he said, he woke up in a parking lot, sobbing, begging someone, anyone, to show him a way back. That someone, he said, was Jesus. Not in thunder, not in shame, just in the quiet. The two of us, we weren't the same. But we carried the same ache, and now we carry the same hope. He invited me to share at a local event a few weeks later, a gathering for men who'd lost children. I didn't want to. I didn't think I was ready. But I showed up. I told the truth. I told them about the pain, the spit, the rage, the silence, and the voice. I told them about Emily, about how she didn't scold me in that vision. She didn't run. She wept for me, and how that changed everything. When I stepped off that tiny stage, a woman in her 50s hugged me like I was her own son. Another man just gripped my shoulder and said, "I thought I was too far gone." That night, I realized healing isn't just something that happens to you, it's something that happens through you. And every time I tell the story, I bleed a little less. Not because the wound isn't real, but because I'm not hiding it anymore. And something strange has started happening since then. People send me messages, emails, letters. "I lost my son too. My daughter's gone. And I blamed God until I heard your words. I never believed in anything. But maybe I will now." I don't respond with theology. I'm not a preacher. I just tell them what I know. If he could find me, he can find you. Because that's the truth I now carry. Not doctrine, not perfection, just a story. A bruised, brutal, beautiful story. Of a father, a daughter, and a Savior who walked into my wreckage and said, "Even here, I'm not done with you yet." If you're still listening, maybe you've seen a part of yourself in this mess of a story. Maybe you've never spat on a cross, but you've cursed the sky. Maybe you never drank yourself numb, but you've sat alone in a room, begging for something, anything, to make the pain stop. I don't tell this story because it makes me look strong. I tell it because it proves I was weak, and still found grace. You might be wondering, does God really care about someone like me? And my answer isn't theological. It's personal. Yes, he does. Because he cared about someone like me, a drunk, bitter, broken father who blamed the Creator for everything that went wrong. And still, he came for me. Not when I cleaned myself up, not when I said the right words, but when I had nothing left to say. When all I had was spit and tears and silence. That's when he showed up. If you're asking, is it too late? No, it's never too late. If you're still breathing, you're still being pursued, still being invited. I've been asked, what do I say to him? How do I start? Start with the truth. Say what's real. If all you've got is, "I'm angry," say that. If all you've got is, "I don't believe anymore," say that. He can handle it. He's not scared of your questions. He's not offended by your doubt. What he wants is your heart, raw, honest, beat up and bleeding if it has to be, because that's where healing starts, not with perfection, but with permission. Give him access to the parts of you you've tried to bury, the parts you think are too ugly to redeem, because that's what he came for. Not the polished version, the real you. I know that sounds hard to believe. I get it. I wouldn't have believed it either until I saw my daughter in a room of light and heard a voice that wrecked everything I thought I knew. A voice that said, "Even the broken belong to me." You don't have to see what I saw to trust what I know. All you need is one step, one whisper, one surrender, and he'll meet you there, not with condemnation, but with arms wide open. If you've got questions about God, grief, hell, heaven, I don't have all the answers. But I'll sit with you in the asking, because that's where he met me. And if he could find me on a night when I spat on his name, he can find you in whatever darkness you're in right now. So here's my question to you. What's keeping you from coming home? After I shared my story online just once, raw and unedited, I didn't expect anything. I figured people would scroll past or leave a few comments at best. But something strange happened. People started reaching out, not with judgment, not with debate, just stories. Hundreds of them, from every state, from veterans, single moms, ex-addicts, people who'd walked away from faith decades ago. Some said, "I've never told anyone this, but I lost my daughter too." Others just wrote one line, "That was me." And one woman wrote, "I used to pray for my son every night. He died last year. I thought God hated me, but then I heard your voice, and it felt like someone finally understood the silence." A man messaged, "I don't believe in God, still don't, but I cried for the first time in 10 years. I started printing them out, those messages, taping them on the wall of that same room where I saw Emily. That room is now sacred to me, not because of what I saw, but because of what's happening in others." Redemption echoing outward. I get invited now to speak at prisons, recovery groups, churches I once mocked. But the part that humbles me most is the quiet stuff. The emails from dads who buried their faith with their child and somehow dug it up again through my story. The women who thought God only loved clean people. The skeptics who tuned in to laugh, but stayed through the tears. I'm not special. I'm not a preacher. I'm just a man who fell hard and found out the ground he landed on wasn't concrete. It was grace. And I believe that grace is contagious. That's why I've started a small community, nothing fancy, just a place where people can be honest, no judgment, no polished faith, just questions, pain, and hope. If you want invitations, you're welcome. You don't need a resume, just a heartbeat and a willingness to be real. We've got guys who still drink, women who still doubt, people who curse and cry in the same breath. And guess what? That's where God shows up most. In the mess, in the middle, in the places no one wants to talk about. My hope is that this story doesn't end with me, that it sparks something in you, not a religion, a return to the one who's been waiting, patient, tender, unshaken by your worst moments. And if you've ever thought, "There's no way he wants me," let me say this as clearly as I can. He already does. If you've made it this far, thank you, not just for listening to my story, but for letting it sit with you. I don't know your name, where you're from, what you've done, or what you've lost. But I do know this. If something inside you stirred while hearing this, that wasn't just emotion. That was invitation. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't need to clean yourself up. You don't need the right words. All you need is one honest breath and a willingness to say, "Okay. I'm tired of carrying this alone." That's where it starts. That's where it started for me. On a cold floor, spit still drying on a cross I didn't understand. And yet, he came for me anyway. So if you're ready, or even almost ready, I want to offer something simple. No pressure, no script, just this. Pause, right now, wherever you are. Let the noise fade for just a second. Close your eyes if you can, and whisper something real. Maybe it's help. Maybe it's, "I'm listening." And maybe it's, "I don't believe yet, but I want to." Whatever it is, if it's honest, he hears it, I promise. And if you want someone to pray with you, for you, we're here. This isn't just a video. It's a doorstep. You can comment below. You can message. You can say nothing and still be part of this. I read every story, every comment, Not because I'm trying to build a brand, but because I know what it's like to scream into the dark and wonder if anyone is out there. I can't promise answers, but I can promise presence. We've got people who care, who don't flinch at your past, who've walked through hell and somehow still believe in heaven. And if you want to be part of that, if you want to step into something gentle and real, come find us. We have a small prayer group online. You don't have to turn your camera on. You don't even have to speak. Just show up. Because sometimes healing doesn't start with words. It starts with showing up broken and being told, "That's enough." So here's me saying it to you now. You're enough. Right here. Right now. Not when you change. Not when you perform. Just as you are. The same way he met me. Broken. Angry. Exhausted. And yet, he came close. If you're wondering, could he really love someone like me? The answer is yes. He already does. And if you're waiting for a sign, maybe this is it. Maybe that ache in your chest right now, that pull you can't explain, isn't just pain. Maybe it's the beginning of coming home. And if so, welcome. We've been waiting for you.